I'm sure that there are many, many people feeling schadenfreude right now as they watch these giant media entities succumb to layoffs. Unlike the normal intermittent spate that we usually have in this area, it's been an unending deluge of announcements from all of the major media outlets out there, in particular the ones that focused on one subject starting sometime around 2015. Comments on social media haven't been filled with sympathetic language either. In fact, it's been quite the opposite. Even as we enter into the heart of the Christmas season, not many are being very charitable in their descriptions of what and why this is happening. And I can't blame some of them, to be honest with you. Yet, as a new player prepares its staff for their round of layoffs, it was all but inevitable. You can only fund propaganda with no return for so long. Today, let's talk the Washington Post and a media landscape that has lost an audience to their own detriment through their own reporting and their own choice on what to report. Here we go. When Variety dropped their VIP article, Media Biz Holds Up Amid Broader Surge in Layoffs, I laughed harder than I expected. There's no way I could have laughed any harder, I think, at the time. And this is going back a couple of weeks now. The headline alone was absolutely ridiculous. Even their data usage and, of course, the charts that they put out there to try to project a rosy picture, even as CNN started to pink slip huge numbers of folks in their overbloated empire. From that point, it was on. BuzzFeed then slashed 13% of its workforce. I did a video on that. In fact, I did a video on CNN, and I did a video previously on all these other media interests collapsing, but more is happening. Morning Brew laid off 14% of its staff. Vice Media announced another round of reductions as well, taking out 2% of their staff. Again, some companies just shuttered altogether. Protocol called it quits completely and took 60 jobs with it. And the video startup called The Recount, it suspended operations entirely. Those cutbacks are slimmer, believe it or not, than when a giant lays off staff. Gannett drops 6% of its staff in its news division, and that is a ton of jobs. The numbers here are being driven by an ad revenue. We've already talked about this several times. CNN lost 11% of its ad revenue in just 1 year. Digital outlets are being hit even harder than that, especially the large-scale ones that don't have enough subscriptions to keep them buoyant. In a recent article from The Wrap just a few days ago, the authors interviewed an assistant professor of journalism over at Ithaca University. I guess there was no real professor that would take their call. Just a slight chide there. Anyway, according to Allison Frisch, Google and Meta disrupted the marketing advertising revenue model that these outlets had come to depend on. She points a finger directly at social media as the main problem, saying, and I quote, "They target advertisers with their users' data, a move traditional media companies haven't been able to replicate because the audiences for newspapers and cable news are moving to social media and streaming. Add to that the rise in inflation and the slowing economy, and news media companies are finding it hard to compete." That's true. A lot of you come here to these various media platforms, these video platforms, to listen to somebody like me, or maybe Tim Pool or Jeremy at the Quartering, or any number of 100 million of us strong that will tell you what we think about just about anything. Anyway, she continues, social media has fractured and polarized many because it uses algorithms to feed content to people based on what they like or click on. That's true. This eliminates the need for us to feel cognitive dissonance when we see something we don't agree with. That's also true. They then serve the audience to advertisers on a silver platter with social media, big tech, the audience users, and basically that's their product, us. And advertisers are their customers, as it was in the 20th century television commercial advertising model. And she's not wrong, despite the fact that, I hate to agree with somebody like this, but this is exactly what's happening in the space in real time. One thing she said that truly hits the nail on the head, and this was surprising, is media companies need to evolve their business model to meet the demands of technology. Relying on advertising alone no longer works, she says, so media companies must diversify the ways that they pay for the work. It's dangerous to believe that they can balance the books by eliminating journalists. That's true. They must be aggressive and creative in how they fund and disseminate this important work. Well, some journalism is important, and some of it is a scandal sheet. It's easier to cut back on the scandal sheet, isn't it? Now here is where she completely jumps off the rails and back into what got them into this mess, is this thinking, which I think is a problem. This can include public media taking a larger role, philanthropy, nonprofit, and products such as newsletters, live events, and even crowdfunding. Well, clearly she doesn't get the fact that no one trusts the media or the mainstream media any longer because, well, they're no longer seen as truthful. They are pointed at specifically for severe bias. And you know what? The Twitter files have done nothing but expose that in real time. And a bigger miss here, in my opinion, is this philanthropy kick, because it gets you far worse bias, is basically paid to play. And we've seen what that has done over at CNN with some of the Gates Foundation stories. You don't have to look that far to see what's happening or has happened over the years at NPR. They are now stuck trying to find ways to cut back. They're doing hiring freezes. They're eliminating interns entirely. The model itself, when you depend upon, the kindness of strangers like that, the philanthropic model, you end up having to beg corporate overlords to survive. That's where NPR is. Returning to the latest WaPo story, which again is the whole impetus or the whole reason for me doing this video, you don't have to do much more than listen to the leaked video of the town hall where the leader there announced the layoffs. Fred Ryan shut down questions after dropping the news on his organization, saying, "We're not going to turn this town hall into a grievance session." And you know what? I'm with him. You're giving bad news to people who don't want to hear it, and adults should be able to absorb that to some extent and not, throw a tantrum, which I believe has been reported in lots of locations. Based on some reports that the organization itself is actually quite bloated, it's no wonder why Fred Ryan over there, is trying to steer the outlet towards some form of profitability, removing about 9% of the positions and retaining people who provided high value can go a long way to turning the place back in the right direction. Of course, they announced this very strategically as less than 10% of the staff. You're right. Not a double-digit decline. It's a single-digit decline. But anyway, they have a bigger problem. Can they replace the 500,000 subscribers that they lost since January 2021? Let me say that again. They lost 500,000 subscribers since January 2021. And here's another whiplash fact that I don't think most people know. With revenues of about $600 million this year in 2022, by the end of the year, the Post is still not expected to make a profit. Oh, and one more fun fact. I'm just full of them today. The WaPo itself could be sold or spun off. In fact, they may spin off their software division, Arc XP, as part of this process. So the future doesn't look very bright for WaPo or most other big media digital outlets. But don't lose hope altogether. There are some bright spots that are emerging here from our very own spaces. We have, of course, a new entity called the Free Press, and you can find them at thefp.com. It's emerging as a news source with quality journalism and journalists. You have the Daily Wire, Red State, Bounding into Comics. All of those are quality outlets as well. There are many resources you can find in Substack, and there are many wonderful journalists in Patreon as well. In fact, if you'd like, feel free to share some of your favorite resources down below, because I'm always looking for new news sources out there. But hey, overall, I have to ask you, what do you think? Do you see more major media outlets struggling across the board? Do you think they'll be in the same position that WaPo and CNN and many others are? How many more activists will be finding their way to the unemployment line? I'm not cheering for that, but I think that unfortunately journalism has become a form of activism instead of a position of finding and telling the truth. And finally, I think, do you think that WaPo will actually be sold off? It's looking pretty likely. If I were Jeff Bezos, I'd be running away from it as fast as I could. And with that, as I mentioned, please feel free to use the comment section down below. I would love to have some conversation here and get some new resources on places I can go to look for additional stories. And of course, I will always suggest that you support independent creators here on these platforms. They absolutely do need it. It's the only way that we can grow. And as I approach 5,000 subscribers, I would just like to say thank you, onward to 10. And with that, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, wash your hands, of course, because it's good hygiene. And until next time, bye.
And don't forget to check out my Rumble at rumble.com/CultureCasino.
Thanks for visiting today. Be sure you're subscribed and hit that for alerts.
Yay!
Of course, like and share all of the videos that you can, as it helps with the algorithm. Have a great day.